History and Culture podcasts are a production of PCN, a nonprofit television network. Listeners like you make our programming possible. To learn more about PCN's mission and to support PCN with a donation, visit pcntv.com. This link and others can be found in our show notes. We appreciate your support.
Welcome to PCN's History and Culture podcast. I'm Phil Beckman. This podcast series features interviews exploring Pennsylvania's rich history from the colonial era to industrialization, the Gettysburg Campaign to sports history, and from art to politics and more. Geoffrey Ward is the author of The American Revolution, An Intimate History, based on the documentary film by Ken Burns, Sarah Botstein, and David Schmidt. Geoffrey, how do you approach writing a script versus writing a book?
You start with the script. I've done a lot of these now, and starting with the Civil War all those years ago. And what it does for me is I find lots and lots of material as I start writing, some of which does not appear in the show. It ends up on the cutting room floor if there were one anymore. And I get to put all those things back. So that's part of the fun of it. And then it's, our films, Ken likes words. So our films are sort of book-like in that sense. They have a lot more narration than most documentaries do. And so I don't want to say that it's easy to change it because it's 4 or 5, 6 times as long as the film script. But it's sort of, if you've seen the show and you want to find out more about the people who are in it, that's there for them. And that always relieves my guilt of leaving things out.
Now, when you write a script, somebody at some point is going to be performing or reading that script. Does that change how you phrase things or how you write things versus writing for a book?
No, Ken is also very good about that. He tends to find people who are not intimidated by long paragraphs and long sentences with lots of commas in them. And Peter Coyote, who has done the last few films, is just a genius at narrating. We give him the script, which he has never seen before. And he tells it as if it was a story he'd known all his life and wants to share with you. That's a great gift. There are a lot of actors who do narration, but what they really do is themselves doing narration. Peter is not interested in that. He's interested in getting the story out to people.
Talk more about the process with Peter Coyote. Do you write the script? Are you there when he's reading it, when he's recording it?
No, Ken is mostly there. I'm very fond of him, and I've gone to, over the years, several of them. I'm not very useful at telling people how to read it, and especially with him, which it just seems to come naturally. When he reads it once, and then maybe he does another take just to be sure, and that's it. Whereas other people take weeks to do this kind of stuff. It's a lot of words.
So when you're beginning a program like this, are there a lot of discussions between you and Ken and some of the other actors here, or do you begin with an idea of how you want to approach it?
Well, we talk about what the story, we talk about the subject, and then I disappear for a while and just read. You can see behind me I'm working on three shows on Lyndon Johnson at the moment, and there must be, 350 books here, maybe. I won't read every word of all of them, but I will read in all of them. And there were many more for the Revolution. And then there's a point at which I can't stand not to write. And at that point, I get started. And then I write, and then I hand him a script. He then, it's always too long and too, has flaws within it, God knows. But his things, it's unlike most people who do documentaries who sort of know at the very beginning what it's going to be like. And they interview people assuming they're going to say the 4 things that you want them to say from their book. He's very good at doing, and the other people are, Lynn Novick and Sarah Botstein, are wonderful at eliciting stuff that you would never have crossed your mind from witnesses and historians, only historians in the case of the Revolution. And so it's full of surprises for me. and it's not somebody filling a gap. It's how do we tell this? What's the best way to tell a story that I'm telling and they're telling?
Now, these documentaries involve interviews with historians and experts on these topics. Do you get transcripts of those before you write, or do those take place after or during writing?
We do that again is different with Ken. They go ahead and interview, even though I'm writing the story, so that when I get close to the end of the first draft, suddenly I'm inundated with um, uh, selects from those interviews. I initially resent them because I've already told the story. I don't want some damn historian telling it. I've got it down, but I'm wrong almost every time because it makes it far more interesting and lively to get people involved with other people.
Now, you mentioned all the books that you were reading for these different projects. Do you also reach out to historians on your own and have conversations with them?
Yes, yes. Uh, Alan Taylor, especially on this show, who got really interested at the beginning and was marvelously helpful. Historians are not always helpful. Some of them are, it's like a faculty meeting at which people forget about what they're supposed to be doing, which was helping us do a film, and just want to show each other how many books they've read and sort of. This was not like that. This is the best panel of historians I think we've ever had. And they were wonderfully cooperative and willing to go places they didn't think we. I think I think academics, when they hear somebody's going to do a documentary, assume it's going to be a very simplified story. Ken has a neon sign, a little neon sign in his editing room, which says it's complicated. And every historical story is complicated. And we try to get as much of that complication in to the film as we can. And then I try to further complicate things in the book.
Do you get a sense that there's a difference between how, say, academic historians approach a topic versus how you and filmmakers and the people who are perhaps on a more public-facing side approach it?
Yeah, I mean, partly it's because narrative has sort of gone out of fashion in academia. People study things, particular things. And so that's different. Um, we try to be as rigorous, and I think we are as rigorous as academics are. And we have, if you saw one of the scripts, it has, sometimes half a page of footnotes because we want to be sure we get it right. That's also the thing that they contribute, which is to say, the latest scholarship shows that he wasn't there, and therefore you can't tell the story that way, so on. And that's hugely useful and very helpful. But in this case, the historians really had a sort of big picture stuff, all of them. They all wanted to tell the whole story, and that was a joy and not always encountered when we do these films.
When you're writing, are you thinking visually as well? Are you thinking about the types of images that might go along with the words that you're putting down?
I do more of that. I used to be the editor of American Heritage many years, a lifetime ago, and there's nothing I love more than old pictures and trying to work with them. On the Revolution, it was harder because there's so much less stuff to work with. There are no photographs. There is no vintage film, obviously. So they had to do a lot of creative use of paintings and details from paintings, and my scripts don't say the, you know there will be Trumbull's painting here, that we will show the State House in Philadelphia here, because it's not how he likes to do them. Ken likes to think of it as a story and then try to both illustrate and expand upon it with the choices of images. And they are now. Then they let me do a book, though. There are 500 illustrations in the book, And if I do say so myself, it's a marvelous collection of revolutionary stuff, both uh, authentic stuff from the period, of which there is much more than I ever thought there was. Incredible vintage maps, which I could spend my life just looking at old maps that are so spectacularly beautiful, and the paintings from the actual period, and then 19th century views of what they thought the revolution looked like. And I tried to write captions about those pictures so that you knew what was real and what was not, uh, what artists had invented and what they uh, really did research for. And that was an extraordinary amount of fun. I really, they're British art, French art, American Indian art. And I think it's a great collection.
The American Revolution is a huge topic, but it's also something that there's, on the one level, great familiarity within the popular culture about it. It's not an obscure topic, but as you're doing research, certainly you're discovering things that you did not know. Was there anything that really surprised you?
Yeah, let me just say, you're absolutely right. I confess this. When I was the editor of Heritage years and years ago, we sort of had to have a colonial revolutionary era story in every issue. The readers expected it. And partly because we were told we had to do it. We used to call it short pants history. And and it was very we didn't concentrate on it the way we should have. I learned a lot doing this. I've written about a lot of different American history topics. I had no idea. I had no idea the revolution was so awfully bloody. Uh, I think it's quite a sanitized thing in the popular, except for there's Valley Forge. Otherwise, things went pretty well. I think that's how high schools sort of teach it to you, and that's utterly untrue. It was a very close thing, right to the end. Um, and anyway, the things I learned, the sheer bloodiness of it, the division in the country, nobody really knows a certain number, a percentage of people who favored the revolution, people who opposed it, and people who just wanted to keep their heads down and hope that it would somehow go past them and leave them alone so they could get on with their farming and their city life. Um, I had no idea how many African Americans lived in the colonies. A third of the non-Indian population was was black. That was never taught to me when I was in high school. That nobody touched upon that in those days. Um, the division within families fascinated me. I had dealt with that about the Civil War. That's a standard part of writing about the Civil War. Not so much this one. And it's funny, when I got through, um, I got interested in my family, which came here early. And I had always wondered which side I would be on as you went through, because it was quite a conservative revolution when it started. They just wanted things to go back to the way they were. Uh, and so I looked up my family. I I have an ancestor named Epaphroditus, the wonderful name of General Epaphroditus Champion, who took 300 cows from Connecticut to Valley Forge and fought the revolution. And I also am descended from Lieutenant John Ward, who joined a Tory regiment at the very beginning of the war, fought all the way through, and ended up in New Brunswick in Canada because he could not bear the thought of living under the rebel flag. That's interesting, and I'm still not sure which side I would have been on. um, I think there are a lot of things. Just in addition to the bloodiness, the staying power of those poor people who were in the Continental Army and in the militias, who fought for years against the mightiest power on earth, and stayed with it to the end. They had staying power that it just astonishes me. And I think it had more to do with the same thing that allows soldiers to fight for so long in modern wars, which is the loyalty to your particular group of, to your regiment, to your company. But we followed two grunts in the thing. One is Joseph Plum Martin, who has been done before many times, but I think he's a very good character in this, and who fought all through the war. And I mean, there's another one, John Greenwood, who got into the army because he didn't know what else to do. He was a teenaged fifer, and left a marvelous diary. It was the kind of thing which allows us to say it's an intimate history. It's a history of real people doing things. Who fought up to Trenton, then quit. He said, "I've had enough." He was not one of the ones who bravely agreed to go on because George Washington begged them to, and went home and was bored there. And so after a while, he became a privateer. He was captured 5 times from 5 different ships and imprisoned in the Caribbean islands. Then came back, had a series of ghastly misadventures, ended up a dentist, and ended up George Washington's dentist. And we found his he was allowed, he revered the last tooth he pulled from George Washington's jaw, was also Washington's last real tooth, and put it in his watch fob. And if you want to see that, it's in the book because it still exists.
You mentioned some of the different points of view between patriots and loyalists and people who are just trying to keep their heads down. But there were many other points of view as well. Large numbers of Native American nations were along the borders of the colonies. And how did the revolution impact them?
Oh, dreadfully. They are the victims of the revolution. They ownership of their land was really one of the great causes of the revolution. The British, desperate to avoid having to pay for Indian wars, which they had paid for before that, after the French and Indian War, drew a line down the Appalachians and told the colonists they could not move beyond it, couldn't go west. This did not sit well with either hardscrabble people who wanted to start over somewhere and big land speculators like George Washington. And the Indians then faced the choice of, which side of this peculiar contest between white people they should be, would benefit them the most. And the tragic thing, I think, is that when the treaty was finally written, Indians are not mentioned in it, so that all that they had done on both sides received no real reward, except, I guess, for those who fled to Canada and tried to set up lives there. But that's not a happy side of the American Revolution.
And the Six Nations Confederacy ended up splitting during the war, with the Oneida and the Tuscarora siding with the Americans, and the Mohawk, Onondaga, the Cayuga, and Seneca siding with the British. How did that impact the life of that Confederacy over the long term?
Well, I mean, that had been a very powerful Confederacy, and so well organized that Ben Franklin tried to tell people before the Revolution that the colonies should adopt the same not the how do I put this, well, to unite. It's just as simple as that. And you know, they did not benefit. Neither side of them benefited. It was split apart, and it's never, I think, gone back to anything like what it was.
Now, you mentioned one of your ancestors ended up in Canada. Canada plays a role in this as well as a British colony that did not join the independence movement.
Right.
How did Canada fit into this at that time?
Well, let me just say one thing. When the war started, there were 26 British colonies in and around North America, and most of them were in the Caribbean, and they were the most valuable colonies. They're much more valuable than we were. That was another thing I didn't know. Sugar did very well for people in London, and a lot of their decisions are based on what's it going to do to the sugar trade. Twice we tried to take Canada to make it the 14th colony. We did not succeed. We could, and I don't think we're going to succeed this time either. But perhaps I shouldn't say that.
Now, this was not just a war for independence, but ideas played a very key part in the politics of it as well. Many of them famous for us, issues of equality, liberty, a Republican form of government. And so as you're researching this and as you're looking into this subject, how do you incorporate these ideas into the story?
Well, we did it again. These films work best when they're about people. So we did some of the founding fathers and the arguments among them. I think it's hard to. I think people fought in the revolution for lots of reasons, and democracy was not one of them. That was not thought a good idea by most of the founding fathers. A republic was, but not democracy as we think of it. That was sort of licensed and guaranteed to fall apart. It was the general feeling about that. But it was, to me, also what was interesting was how it develops. People decide first that Parliament is the villain because that's easy to do, and it does not question your devotion to the beloved monarch. And then Thomas Paine came and blamed the beloved monarch, and that was an enormous change, and it allowed us to declare independence.
So when you were working on this project, the script part of it, are you working on other projects too? Do you work on multiple projects simultaneously?
When I was younger, I could do that. It's harder now. I'm doing Lyndon Johnson now, which couldn't be a larger, a more different topic. And yeah, a little bit. I mean, while they're working on day-to-day stuff, on putting together rough cuts for us to look at, I do usually start the next one. Yeah, that's true. Unless I'm writing a book, in which case as I did on this one, in which case I was feverishly trying to get the book done so that it could come out at the same time as the show. And I succeeded again. So
when you look back at some of the previous films, whether it's Jazz or the Civil War, do you see your own process evolving over time?
That's an interesting question. I've never really looked back, I guess. A lot of things are easier now because I sort of know how long a scene should be. How the thing I enjoy most, both in writing books, and I've written a number of books that have nothing to do with Ken's films. I love weaving stories chronologically, so that you're kept guessing what's happening to John Greenwood And then we go to Betsy Ambler, who is another figure that we had. She's a teenaged daughter of a Virginia official who flees the British twice and lived in Yorktown. But those stories, you know, something can be happening to each of them at the same moment, and so you can keep doing that. I love it. I think it's I suspect if I look back, the scripts at the beginning were a little more pedantic maybe than they are now. Beyond that, it hasn't changed very much.
So for a program like this, where you're looking at figures that are well known throughout American history, often there are myths built around them. How do you try to balance out, or how do you try to kind of tease out the facts behind the myths?
You just tell it straight and hope that people say, what we don't do is say Betsy Ross didn't sew the flag. We just talk about how women eventually produced a flag, because there isn't really any evidence that Betsy Ross did. But we don't say Betsy Ross didn't. We just tell you what really happened. I think that's the best way to do that. And I think the other thing is, this is a bugaboo of mine. I don't think history repeats itself. I think that's not true. But it does, as Mark Twain apparently said, or should have said, it chimes. And the problem with doing history as hero worship is that you turn people just like yourself into some other kind of being which has no flaws. Everybody has flaws. I wrote, I guess it's 4 books now about Franklin Roosevelt, who's a great hero of mine, but deeply flawed human being. And in my view, if you know about the great things great people did, and you also know about the flaws, and you realize that they didn't know they were going to be great, and they didn't know what was going to happen on Tuesdays, just the way you and I don't know what happened on Tuesday. If people don't understand that, they have no impetus to do great things. If they did them, we can do them. Is my feeling, and worship, veneration of heroic figures without understanding their flaws and weaknesses isn't really history at all.
You mentioned that you're working on your project on Lyndon Johnson. When you begin something like that, he was certainly somebody you were familiar with in history. Do you really go deep into their lives in a way that makes you realize things about them?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I don't want to give away stuff, but Johnson was a very insecure person, and for all of the amazing achievements of his and the terrible tragedy of Vietnam, on some level, he was a person who wasn't at all sure he should have that job that he'd craved all his life. And there are several times when he tried to resign. I had not known that. And it makes you more sympathetic to him, not less, I think, to understand that it overwhelmed him sometimes. Because when you read about the presidency, especially a presidency like his, in which he's frenzied to do things. He's the most active, hands-on, psychologically, manipulative genius. But that underlying that is insecurity. It makes him a human being, which he was.
With regards to the American Revolution project, both the script and the book, is there anything that you did in that process that you're most proud of?
Oh boy, pulling it off. is one just because we had comparatively so little to work with. There are thousands of photographs of the Civil War, and we had to figure out ways to do that. One way we did it was I was very worried. As I've said before, I have an almost perfect record with Ken of giving him bad advice. I told him the Civil War probably wasn't doable. I told him baseball was boring, which I still think it is, but that's just between you and me. And and I thought the revolution was really going to be hard, and it was hard. But one very smart thing I think he did was he used people who recreate the battles and are very strict about the uniforms and all that. But he used them abstractly, so that you don't ever notice that the guy in the colonial outfit is your realtor. That we don't look exactly the way 18th century people did, and you don't see the faces in this. You see boots moving through mud, women washing bandages in the river, that kind of thing. And those are all live films filmed by our magnificently talented cinematographer, Buddy Squires, who's worked for Ken for 40 years. Not even longer than I have.
We've been speaking with Geoffrey Ward. He is the author of The American Revolution and Intimate History. Geoffrey, thanks for joining me.
Thank you. It was fun.
Listeners like you make PCN programming possible. Full episodes of PCN's history and culture content, like the interview you just heard, are available to stream with the PCN Select app. Explore other documentary programs, event coverage, and a lot more. To learn more about PCN's mission and to support PCN with a donation, visit PCNTV.com. This link and others can be found in our show notes. We appreciate your support.